build that bridge or create that process or the best practices to get you from where you believe you want to be and the life you want to live to where you're not necessarily stuck at, but where you're at right now.
And now, great minds and one bald guy.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for another rendition of the podcast of Smart People and One Bald Guy. I have one of my smartest colleagues that I like to call friend and cohort is Ryan Kimble. He's the head of all health distribution for Integrity. And I try to line up some heavy hitters, and this is probably as far up as I can swing here. So I wanted to say hello, Ryan, and introduce you to the market and IFC's agents.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Listen, I just turned 50 this year. My hair is going faster than I would like it to, so it won't be too long until it's two bald guys and a couple smart people. So we'll see how it goes. But a pleasure to be here. Glad to be in front of the team and all the agents you guys support.
Well, excellent. We're really excited about, we try to bring a positive spin into whatever's coming up in the agent's way. And what we'd like to have you talk about or take a minute talk about is really, what is your upbringing? How did you get in the business yourself?
Yeah, so man, I started in the business back in 1996. My dad, I was 2 years into college. And my dad had asked if I would want to work with him at a company called Integrated Benefits at that time. And he had done group health insurance in West Virginia. And so he's like, you need to get your insurance license first, start selling some individual health plans. They even sold a couple life plans. And started working with him during the summers while I was in college and also over Christmas breaks, running individual health quotes, running the old group health quotes. This was back when an agent would call you on the phone and you would write down the age, zip code, what county they were in. You would write down, smoker, non-smoker. So we did a lot of quoting back then for individual medical plans. And then when I got out of college, I started working with him full time, basically going out and working with agents and agencies in the Medicare space. So we did long-term care. We did Medicare supplements at that time, even did some ancillary products, but we really tried to help agents better understand the competitive Medicare products across really West Virginia and Ohio, like those three states. And we ultimately had changed that company's name over to Agent Pipeline. So a lot of the folks here may recognize that name. And the primary driver for us at that time was we couldn't buy the integratedbenefits.com domain name, and it was already taken. And so we ended up going with Agent Pipeline, and we had two brands for a long time, and then we finally switched over to just Agent Pipeline. But long story short, Todd, my dad had brought me in the business. He had brought my sister in the business as well. My brother had worked for us for years at Agent Pipeline, and it truly was, and really to this day still is, a family business. And my role at the very beginning was working in his office. So it was a historic, kind of an old house is what it was, and it had been converted over to office space. And he had the master bedroom as his office. My office was the closet of the master bedroom. And so my back would hang out of the closet. And he just had me making calls all day, like calling insurance agents about group health, individual health, and then ultimately Medicare. And what was funny is I remember, every time I'd hang up the phone, he would say, "Hey, why didn't you say this?" or "Why didn't you do this?" And it actually taught me a bunch. But I do remember a few times where I would have, been finished with a call. The agent would have already hung up. I would have probably put my finger on the dialer and then just kept talking and kept mentioning things that I knew he would bring up if I just hung the phone up. So it was a way for me to kind of prevent some of this mentorship that was very close, because he was just sitting over here. I could barely see him, but he heard every call I made. So, but anyway, growing up in the business, it's something I've done all my life since I was, really 20. And this is my 30th year in the business. And now my role after Agent Pipeline partnered with Integrity in 2020, in 2022, Brian Adams had asked me to come up and be the president of Integrity Health. So my role today is working with great businesses like yours, Todd, and all the people you have across the country. Integrity has several businesses across the country. But my role is to work in the over age 65 health space, which is Medicare Advantage, Medicare Supplements, Part D, and even the ancillary products. And then under age 65, which is traditional ACA, other types of medical products, as well as the ancillary and group health products there. So work with a lot of great partners, work with a lot of great agents and agencies, and being year number 30, it feels like you've seen a lot. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a lot, but it's been good to be a part of it, and pleasure to be here today to hopefully share some of that story.
Yeah, and I know you kind of breezed over that whole, you built Agent Pipeline up to almost 30,000 agents and things like that, probably the largest IMO in the nation. And guys, he has done an amazing job there. There's a reason why Brian Adams tapped him on the shoulder to run health. He's able to leverage and run large organizations. But I know one of the other things that you've been really active in, and I've gotten a lot more active here probably in the last 2 years too, but you've been jumped head into it in 22, is a lot of more political and a little more forward when it comes to lobbying and some of those. So why don't you talk about some of the things that have happened, or that Integrity's kind of an integral in, that I don't think they get a lot of press on, or you get a lot of respect for?
Well, it's something I personally started back before I took this role as Integrity or president of Integrity Health. We had worked with NABIP at that time and other associations, and was on their Medicare FMO council, working with them to try to set strategy. John Green, who used to be with NABIP, was very, very instrumental in a lot of the things we were able to get done in DC. And then when I took the role in 2022 to lead Integrity Health, then we just turned the volume up on that work. And what I would illustrate to folks is, like, we work 2 different ways. We work at the local levels across each state. And there you have the Department of Insurance, and you also have the House and the politicians in each state. And then we work at the national level in DC. And you don't necessarily have the DOI, but we have CMS, obviously, and we've had several meetings with them. But we've continued to try to work in a way that would drive great outcomes for agents and agencies. Clearly, those are the customers that we serve every day, and then trying to make sure the market has continued momentum. So on the Medicare Advantage side, it's trying to get out in front of some of the policies that we would feel would damage the entire industry. And I know in this last 2 years, a lot of it revolved around non-commissionable plans and agents not receiving commission on products, or a lot of service area reductions. So we spent a lot of time in DC, either directly engaging with politicians or working through the associations. And then we have NABIB's annual CapCon conference. And I remember we had Janie Rothman, who was with me in DC, and we had a chance to go up on the Hill and meet with several, congressional folks. And I've got a rule at conferences, and the rule at conferences is that you never go back to your room, right? So whether it's Medicarians or whether it's any other industry conference, or you're up in DC, when you leave your room in the morning, you go to your conference, and then you come back at night. Like, you never go back to your room, because if you do, it only really drives one thing, and that's emails, calls, a nap, or scrolling on your phone. So anyway, short story was, we were in the House is where we were, and we had about an hour and a half to kill before dinner. And so we just decided to start knocking on doors. So we went door to door inside the House, knocking on congressional folks, and would walk in and say, hi, my name is Ryan Kimble. I'm with Integrity. We're out of Dallas, Texas, but we have X number of agents in South Carolina, and we have X number of employees in South Carolina. And we want to talk to you about, non-commissionable plans. We want to talk to you about CMS final rule. We want to talk to you about this. And ultimately, those conversations continue to lead towards what I would say is just having a way to break down and let those folks easily understand the pressure that the market's under, and how insurance agents play an integral role in ultimately what a Medicare beneficiary goes through on the over age 65 side, or on the under age 65 side, what that agent does to help people understand what their plans are. So a ton of work, to your point, Todd. A lot of it's behind the scenes. Whether it's just my personality or not, I feel like that I can get more done, meeting with somebody face to face in their office, as opposed to maybe, yeah, especially at the carrier level, working with carriers behind the scenes, as opposed to being on social media and kind of broadcasting that stuff. But truly a lot of work done by me and also a lot of folks at Integrity. I mean, I know Todd, you do a lot of stuff. Tom does a lot of stuff. We have Craig Ritter and others that continue to do a lot of work in DC. So it's a big piece of what I do now and something I enjoy because it ultimately helps the agents and agencies we support and the Medicare beneficiaries that we support.
Yeah, and I know you also we're very integral starting a large agent coalition that
Yeah,
we believe helped move that fair market value conversation
sure.
off of the with the Texas judge and stuff. So, do you remember how many agents ended up signing on to that petition?
Yeah, it was just over 60,000. So we had 60,000 and that was broken down, Todd, between insurance agents, agencies, and then also Medicare beneficiaries, because a lot of the agents who joined ultimately wanted their customers to join so the customers could be a part of that process and ultimately basically help tell their local congressman or state senator how the final rule was going to impact what agents could do. And we truly believe that the Medicare Advantage marketplace in this example is best served by an independent agent who has access to all the products and plans, right? And what the final rule would have done is really slim down what an agent could offer based on carriers, potentially going like a W-2 type model. And so we didn't want it to get towards what State Farm and what PNC looks like. You have a State Farm office, you have an Allstate office, you have an Erie office. And as a consumer, you would have to go to each office to see what's best for you. We believe in the Medicare market that the independent agent plays such an important role because they can obviously offer an unbiased view of all the plans available. And, Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith can go to one person and find their solution as opposed to having to go down and knock on every office to determine what would be best for them.
Yeah, I know. I got to imagine in the role when you're talking to government organizations, you're talking to agents, you're talking to insurance companies. We talked last fall a ton about it. But the idea of serving three masters is, I have my family, which is my immediate family, and two of them, similar to your company, are working for IFC and also Integrity. But I have my employees, and then I also have then my agents, right? That I'm worried about all the time. But then I serve the third master, which is my insurance companies, which really kind of at the end of the day, if we don't get product and we don't have commissions and we don't have a fair relationship, it kind of wrecks the other two. So you got to juggle these three masters or whatever you want to call it. But you pull in a fourth one when you start talking about Government Hill or CMS and those type of things. So I appreciate the work you do for agents, and I really am happy to hear about what Integrity is doing in the background. I know about it, but I don't think people get to hear or see that. I think they see Integrity Connect and they see a lot of the other stuff that's going on, but the hard work is really keeping that agent position in the marketplace important. And that might be a nice segue for us to just talk about over the last couple of years. I know your big derivative or driver has been MA and ancillary products there. What have you felt about this last couple of years, and what do you see kind of coming as it comes to that? So why don't you talk about the marketplace a little bit?
Yeah. So, broadly, I got into Medicare Advantage in 2005, right? So this is back really as the Medicare Modernization Act came out. We were promoting Part D plans and the private fee for service back then. And obviously a lot's changed since 2005, but even if we go back to pre-COVID, a lot's changed. And, one of the shifts that we saw in 2020, 21, and 22 is that the industry started really moving their resources towards call centers, right? Because at that time, COVID has everything kind of shut down and health plans are trying to figure out how do I enroll Medicare beneficiaries if insurance agents can't be a part of the process. I think we continue to focus on independent agents and agencies, but the carrier side of the coin did shift away from field and put more attention on the call centers. And I think what that led to in the industry was probably a lot of what your agents see today, which is customers who get constantly pounded on the phone to try to switch their plans or change their plans. I think carriers are dealing today with high CTM rates, high calls to Medicare, They're dealing with really the ramifications of swinging towards call centers. Now, the good news is over the last 18 months, we've seen those carriers start swinging back to field agents. And the primary driver is that the independent agent who works in the field and may do some sales over the phone, but really works in the field, they tend to have the best customer experience. So that customer who enrolls with someone in Minnesota, Iowa, or Texas, and they're a local agent helping a local customer, they tend to have the best experience with the carrier, and that leads to great outcomes for the carrier. One, you reduce all your compliance metrics, so you improve those, and then two, those actual Medicare beneficiaries have a better experience that generates a higher star rating. And what we've seen over the last 3 years or 18 months is that we see carriers swinging away from call centers really to be highly focused on the field and how can they engage with the field in a way that'll continue to drive more production and more opportunities for agents. So that's probably been in the Medicare Advantage space when it comes to distribution, one of the biggest impacts we've seen over the last couple of years, which has been great for field agents. I mean, obviously there were a couple of years there where there were some challenges, but now we're in a position where field agents are ultimately the ones that are at the up on the pedestal now from a carrier perspective because they want that engagement and that good customer experience.
Yeah, we both have the pleasure of knowing George Dipple and getting access to Deft Research. And over the last two AEPs, I got the rating for agents has grown over 26 points.
Yeah,
so people that have come out of a situation where they're talking to an agent are over 83% positive reactions and belief that they needed the independent agent to distribute that product or answer their questions or whatever. And Minnesota's had its own challenges, but we're not alone. I mean, everywhere across and stuff. So I think the new CMS idea that came out is just the first run at it. How does that process kind of work coming out when the CMS puts out that they might only have like a 0.9% reimbursement rate growth? We talked about this the other day, but I think it's fascinating. I don't get into the weeds too much, but I need to.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic. So a couple of things I would lay out first. So last week we met with two of the national carriers. This week I'm meeting with two of the national carriers to talk more about 2027 and how they see the plans and ultimately what will be developed. The two carriers we met with last week, they both felt like the 0.9% increase is really the floor and that'll come up. They're hoping it comes up to 3% from an increase perspective. And a couple of ways I would frame it in. One would be what you see from health plans today is that the Inflation Reduction Act has really hurt plans compared to what happened even in the Obama administration, where when Obama came in, he started defunding Medicare Advantage. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of your agents remember that, but that was like a 6-year step down. So every year, the funding rate for MA just kind of slowly decreased. On the Inflation Reduction Act under Biden, what's happened is like he just really turned it down very quickly. And that's what's caused a lot of the plans to have to, ultimately be in a service area reduction, go non-commissionable, or be highly unprofitable. So the Medicare Advantage health plans are trying to deal with that and trying to ultimately drive an outcome that has a path towards profitability. But when we think about 2027 and the rate notice, the going thought is that one, it won't stay at 0.9. It'll probably go up to 2, maybe 3% increase. Carriers are going to stay focused on really the benefits that matter most to Medicare beneficiaries. And, if you had to prioritize those, that kind of starts with your copays, right? So PCP and specialist. It's trying to keep the insurance or what we would think of as insurance or health plan benefits as strong as possible. And then on the, a couple supplemental benefits or the flex card type benefit, those we'll see continue to move around as carriers try to find, the budget to make sure that their plan is on a pathway to profitability. Our message to carriers has really been, we want the carriers to be stable, right? And we don't want them to do service area reductions. So in a world where they have to pull back benefits a little bit, like we don't want to fight against that because we really want them to keep their plan in. So those Medicare beneficiaries can stay on a Medicare Advantage plan and not have to go somewhere else. But we really want them to drive stability. So for the two carriers we talked to last week, the conversation wasn't around them being number one in 2027. It was about them being in like, okay, let's be in the top five, but let's be more focused on stability. So, our customers, which are watching this today, our agents and agencies, aren't focused on every year having to go back and rewrite their book of business because either the plan had a service area reduction or the benefits changed so dramatically that the customer wants to move. And if we go back to pre-COVID, people stayed in their plans for 5, 6, 7 years before they made changes. And that's kind of what we all want to go back to, are plans that are stable and an agent can service a book of business, they can grow a book of business, continue to be that community health worker of sorts, and really drive great outcomes, but not have all the disruption that we see right now. So I think bottom line on the 0.9%, that'll go up. And then both of our carriers said there's some other pieces of what was released in that advance notice that are positive for the carriers. It'll make it easier for them in the fall. But everyone's kind of focused on the 0.9%.
Isn't some of the other positives in the billing practices from the network providers what they can do? That came down to 10 different options instead of hundreds, or what was that?
Yeah, broadly it was to create efficiencies in the process to help carriers ultimately drive better outcomes. And part of it was around profitability too. It made it easier for carriers to be in a position from a coding perspective to know exactly how to do coding. And I think, the regional players, as we look at 2027, may honestly be in a better position than some of the national carriers, depending on the marketplace. So as we think about the fall coming up, it'll be interesting to see what happens in all the markets, because you're going to have regional carriers they'll be positioned well. You have national carriers that'll be positioned well, and there's going to be some where the benefits just change just enough where that member may need to look at their plan again. So I think our message is, let's pay commissions to everybody. Let's drive stability in your products. Let's make sure field agents, the ones that are on this call with this podcast, can be the center point for that member experience. And ultimately, if we stay focused on the member by making sure they have a great outcome, that ultimately puts all of us and our entire industry in the best position possible.
Absolutely. Do you see that they're going to reduce some of these give back programs? It seemed ridiculous that they were losing money in plans, but they're giving hundreds of dollars back. And you see those going away, or?
I think so. There's obviously clearly an appetite in some markets for the give back plans to go out and build up membership in plans. And truly, Todd, there is a place for a give back plan, right? But it's not the right fit for everybody. And I think the traditional Medicare Advantage beneficiary needs to be in a position where they can enroll in a plan that's probably zero premium, but still has all the coverage that they need, and not necessarily be enticed by a give back plan that really has really light benefits, but does give back dollars.
Awesome. Well, I told you I had a little story about the buffalo, and it's kind of pertinent to the group that you're talking to. As we came into last fall, and I don't know if you know the buffalo or the bison story is, if a storm comes at bison, it turns headlong into it, and it goes through the storm, so it spends half the time in the storm that it has to. Yeah. Every other animal runs away from it, or shelters, or hunkers down. It's the only animal in the world that does that. And I want to tell you that all these agents that you talked to did that. They hunkered down. They didn't hunker down. They drove in. They talked to people for free. They did a lot of ad hoc business for nothing. And they're some of the best people I know. But they're tough as hell. And the South Dakota people call buffalo Tatanka. And we actually have that as a cheers now in our company. And with anybody who's on this call, I'd have a drink with you and we'd say Tatanka. But it's a neat way to think about, if it's going to come bad, let's get through it and get over it. And if we think we're through it and over it, do you have a little bit of a crystal ball as to what do you see coming down the road, or what an agent can kind of hang his hat on?
Yeah, I'd say two things. First would be, as we think about those agents who weathered the storm and kind of walked head first into the storm that was approaching, they are now in a position where the market doesn't have quite as many agents in it as it used to, right? And generally, not always, but generally, when the market goes through that process, the agents who would exit the market are agents that may not have been as productive or may not have been active in Medicare specifically. And I think for Medicare agents who weathered that storm, they're in a position now where there'll be more opportunity as we go forward as customers are looking for solutions, especially as we go back to the conversation relative to call centers and telesales, how carriers are kind of swinging away from those right now. So one, I think everybody's positioned well, at least for their staying in the market and weathering the storm. And then secondly, as we think about Medicare Advantage, I mean, clearly we're going to be in next year just north of 70 million Medicare beneficiaries across, that are on Medicare A and B. And Medicare Advantage still makes up the lion's share, or over 50% of those beneficiaries. When they enroll, they're enrolled in Medicare Advantage. And I think the good news for agents is, one, the market will stabilize. Like, it'll continue to get better. And at some point, we'll get back to where we were pre-COVID, which is in this heavy growth mode. But we really want to make sure that we have the stable market. And if I was an agent today, I would think, okay, I'm really well positioned to see the wave that's coming, to where I can ultimately continue to build my business, continue to help Medicare beneficiaries. And I think ultimately, if we keep that at the center of our business plans, our activities, and how we help people, that one, CMS and the carriers and ultimately the industry will look towards independent agents in a more meaningful fashion than they do today. Because right now, the industry looks at us as much, someone who engages in enrolling a member. But I think as we go forward, agents are going to be engaged in different ways to help that member get started in their plan. Like, how can the agent help them get started? And if they get started, is there a way for the agent to have some monetary gain on that side? So I think there's great opportunity coming this fall and into the future as these plans continue to stabilize, and as agents play a more important role in that Medicare beneficiaries' overall journey on healthcare.
Yeah, one of my earlier podcasts, another very intelligent person, Gabe Isaacson, was on.
Yeah,
and he said
very intelligent.
And he came from McKinsey, and if you're really good, integrity will find you and hire you. But he had talked about the statistic of almost 40 to 60% better open rate for an agent delivering information from insurance company than the insurance company delivering it. So eventually, I believe that is going to be a monetized factor for the agent to becoming involved in the health delivery and fall prevention and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a new wave of stuff out there, and different products and a different relationship. I think that the agent's going to have, and a different conversation too. I think that they're going to have.
Totally agree. And I keep a voicemail on my phone. It's from Todd, our group health insurance company. They were reaching out to me, I guess, because of one of the doctor's appointments or something. And I use that as a proof point when I talk to carriers, because I look at that voicemail, like, I'm not sure that that's actually my group health insurance company. They say they're my group health insurance company. And so as I think about, whether it's United Healthcare, Aetna, Medica, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, any of the carriers, as they try to reach out and talk to Medicare beneficiaries, if me at 50 is concerned if I'm getting a fraudulent call, I can only imagine at 65 plus what that feels like, especially with all the calls that they receive just from call centers and lead generators. So the agent, and the way I tell the story to carriers is that I've got a PNC agent. His name's Mike. I've known Mike for a long time. He's actually one of my good friends. And anytime Mike sends me a text or an email, I open it every time, because I know he needs something from me, and it has to do with my insurance. And I think the agents that you guys support, and the agents we support broadly in the industry, are the same position. They work with those Medicare beneficiaries, not just for the transaction, but helping them with everything from getting on state benefits. Sometimes they help them with paying their bills. Sometimes they help them read the actual communication coming from the insurance companies. And I think insurance carriers see the agent as playing this critical role to a point where that they will be willing to help monetize that in a way where agents can be a bigger part of the process and ultimately get paid for a lot of the work they do for free right now. So more things to come. We're working on some of those things now with carriers, trying to keep the agent in the middle. I've got a Forbes article that's coming out hopefully in the next week or so that really highlights how important the insurance agent is in the overall journey for a Medicare beneficiary, and how health plans and insurance carriers should really look at that as an opportunity to let the agent be the one that introduces them to that plan in a more meaningful way. So I think lots of good things to come from that side.
Awesome. And for those on the call, this podcast won't be out for a couple of weeks. So if that Forbes article is done, I'll link that into the white page.
Yeah,
So
for
people
sure.
can be able to pick that up. And then we have links to like Gabe's interview too and whatever on there. So yeah, once again, Ryan, I want to thank you for taking your time. You're one of the busiest guys I know. I appreciate you always getting back to me when you do. You're working with, there's 300 of us out there that are there pulling on your shirt sleeve or shirt tails. So I appreciate the time I get. I can't thank you enough. Again, thanks for being on my podcast,
Yeah.
Smart People and One Bald Guy. And I wish you luck. Thank you. And thank you everybody for listening in.
Yep. Thank you, Todd. Appreciate the time today.